Good Erev Shabbos, everybody. Welcome back. Let's continue. B'shuschem, with your permission. The next Mishnah in Avot, Parak Daled, Mishnah Hey, some have it as Mishnah Daled, goes as follows. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika says, Kol machal shem shamayim b'seiser, anybody who profanes or desecrates the name of God in private, nifrom mimenu b'golui, his punishment will be revealed or he will be exposed. Echad shogeg v'echad mezid. The same applies to he who commits his act, whether it is intentional or unintentional. B'chilul Hashem, with the desecration of the name of God. This is a very enigmatic Mishnah. Very perplexing, and there are a host of questions that come to mind. I'd like to focus on just simply two of them. So question number one is, what's the difference between the beginning of the Mishnah, in which it says, Kol machal shem shamayim, anybody who profanes the name of heaven or for the sake of heaven, and the end of the Mishnah where it says, B'chilul Hashem, desecration of the name of God. Question number two, how is it that when one commits an Aveira b'seiser, or commits chilul shem shamayim b'seiser, profanes the name of God or desecrates the name of God in private, that his sin will be revealed, and that his punishment will be a public punishment? Very perplexing. Let's try to resolve these dilemmas within this particular Mishnah. So number one, A, according to Rabbeinu Yoina, the Mechalel Shem Shemayim is really the same as the Chilul Hashem. The person who desecrates the name of heaven versus the person who desecrates or profanes the name of Hashem, they're really one and the same. The difference does not lie in the act itself that the person performs, but rather where the act is performed. So for instance, a Machalal Shem Shamayim, that's a person who performs a transgression that profanes the name of God in private. But if you do a Chilul Hashem, if you desecrate the name of God, then that is an act, that's a transgression that is performed in public. Rabbeinu Yonah gives another explanation, or an alternative resolution to our problem as to the distinction between Chilul Shem Shamayim and Mechal Hashem. According to Rabbeinu Yonah, he suggests the following: A Mechal Shem Shamayim, the person who desecrates heaven, are true acts of blasphemy and profanity that are performed by an individual, as in Avodah Zarah, a person who performs idol worship, or a person who takes the Lord's name in vain. People who literally perform profanation acts. Chilul Hashem, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, are those public acts that are not actually profaning, literally desecrating God's name's acts, like in Avodah Zarah and taking God's name in vain. Rather, according to Rabbeinu Yonah, a Chilul Hashem is not even a sin in and of itself. Rather, it's talking in this instance, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika in our Mishnah, what is Mechal Hashem, a desecration of Hashem's name? Rabbeinu Yonah says this is talking to Talmidei Chachamim, who go around in the garb of Torah. And if they perform an act that brings scorn upon the Torah, then that, as it is perceived in the eyes of others, to be an act that profanes the name of God. Let me give you an example. The Gemara in Yuma tells us the following. Heichi dami Chilul Hashem. What's the case? What is Chilul Hashem? So the Gemara gives many answers. Amongst them are the following. The Gemara answers, if one purchased meat, if a Talmid Chacham was going and buying meat in the marketplace and he didn't pay for it immediately, and thus people perceive that he's getting away with something, then this is a profanation. It's a desecration of Hashem's name because it's in the eye of the beholder. Another example of one of these acts of a Talmid Chacham. So Rabbi Yochanan says, what is Chilul Hashem in the Gemara in Yuma? He says a Jew who doesn't walk around with Torah and Tefillin. What does this mean? It means that the perception that other people have of a Torah scholar should be sacrosanct. And any act that a Torah scholar performs in public that will in any way, shape, or form bring scorn or derision or a derogatory view of the Torah scholar, then that is something which is a Chilul Hashem in public. Let me give you an extreme example. The Gemara tells us, Talmid Chacham sheyesh revav al begodo chayiv misa. A Talmid Chacham that has a rent in his garment is obligated to the death penalty. What? What are we talking about? A Talmid Chacham that doesn't go around dressed perfectly and that his clothing is rent, he should be chayiv misa? Yes. Maybe not literally. But if we look at that statement of the Gemara of Talmid Chacham sheyish revav al begodo chayiv misa in the light of our Mishnah and Rabbeinu Yoina's explanation that Chilul Hashem is talking about Talmid Chachamim, that a Talmid Chacham must be always act in the most appropriate manner at all times, even to his clothing. He must be a dignified human being always. Now that particular Gemara in Yuma, it continues, and it says the following. What do we do? What do we do with a guy, with a Talmid Chacham, or not even a Talmid Chacham? What do we do with anybody who has profaned or desecrated the name of God? So the Gemara tells us, we expose them in public, those hypocrites who have desecrated the name of Hashem. So if we look back at our Mishnah, I would like to suggest that the Gemara in Yuma copies or mirrors our Mishnah. Nifra mimenu begoloi. He's punished in public. The Gemara in Yuma says, that we expose them in public. Echad shogeg ve'echad mezid. Do you think a Talmid Chacham who's walking in the street, he's performing this act intentionally to desecrate Hashem's name? No, he's the shogeg. And there is no distinction for Chilul Hashem between the shogeg and the mezid. Perhaps. Maybe. Let's look at it a little differently. But what about Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika's statement that says that the person who commits such an act in private, he will be publicly exposed and punished? We know many, many people, bechedre chador, in their inner sanctums, behind closed doors, within the closet, in the privacy of their own homes, who perform many, many averos. You and I don't know about them. You and I may know about our own personal peccadillos and iniquities, but we know nothing about those of others. So what is this Mishnah of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broika coming to tell us? That my iniquities in private will later become exposed. How is that possible? And when? We know many people who get away with murder. They do many, many things in private that are never exposed to the public. The Gemara in Titus tells us. In fact, the person who commits averos, he says, the Gemara tells us, who's going to testify about me? Comes along the Gemara and says, oh yeah, who's going to testify about you? Avnei Beso, the wall, the stones, the foundation of your home. The koiros Beso shel adam meidin bo, and the walls of a person's home will give testimony about him. And the Gemara continues, Shnei malachi hasharis melavin lo adam meidin alav, and the two ministering angels that escort a human being throughout their life, they too will come and testify about him. Nishmaso meidin lo, even his soul will come and testify in love. the Avorov shel Avodim, and even a person's limbs. When a person comes to the Bezdin Shalmaila, when he comes to the heavenly court, Nifroim mimenu bagoloi, everything will be exposed, even those things bechedrei chadorim. Good Shabbos, everybody, and thank you for joining me again.